Have you ever tasted raw chili powder as it burns through your gums and throat, climbing up into your eyes until your vision goes red and the pain makes you scream without sound? I have. And not once, over and over again. My own husband held my jaw open. My son, the same one I nursed when he had night terrors, he stood beside him and laughed. That's how my mornings used to begin. At 72 years old. They say old age is a second childhood. But no child deserves to be broken every day. And no old woman should have to beg for her life in the house she spent decades building with love, with sacrifice. My name is Marlene Ainsworth. I live, or lived, in a modest blue house tucked behind a row of decaying elms in Charleston, South Carolina. I was married for 49 years. Almost half a century. His name is David. Tall. Stoic. Everyone in the neighborhood called him a fine man. He used to fix broken bikes for kids, help the preacher paint the church roof. The perfect gentleman. But you don't see what happens behind closed doors. It started small. Always does. He forgot my birthday one year. The next, he said it was stupid to celebrate. Then came the yelling. You're useless now. Look at you. You're like a dried-up leaf. Old women should know when to shut up. When our son, Elliot, moved back in at 32, divorced, broke, and bitter, things worsened. I was the easiest target. I made excuses at first. He's stressed. He's adjusting. Until I found myself hiding bruises under turtlenecks in August. I still remember the day the chili powder started. David had made chicken the night before. He accused me of throwing away the leftovers. I hadn't. He just forgot where he put them. But the rage that filled his eyes, that wasn't forgetfulness. That was a man looking for a reason. He dragged me to the kitchen sink. Elliot held my arms behind my back. David took a handful of the deep red powder and shoved it into my mouth. My lips split. My gums tore. When I screamed, it lodged in my throat. I couldn't breathe. My eyes ran until I thought they'd bleed. That night, I lay on the floor for hours. They didn't check on me. Not even once. I used to be a teacher. 4th grade. Loved by students. Parents trusted me. They brought me pies and cards. I mattered. I don't know when I stopped mattering. Maybe when I hit 65 and retirement papers were signed. Maybe when the house became silent except for the TV and the echo of my steps. Women like me, we fade. We become ghosts in our own homes. People stop listening. Doctors smile politely but never take the pain seriously. Store clerks talk to us like we're children. And if you tell someone your husband and son are torturing you, they act like maybe you've lost it. Dementia. Confusion. You sure you're not imagining? But I wasn't imagining it. My back bore welts. My teeth loosened. My fingers trembled, not from age, but from fear. One day, Elliot whispered in my ear as I was scrubbing the bathroom tiles, "You're nothing. Not even human. Just a rag we wipe our filth with." I looked up at my reflection in the wet porcelain. My hair, once rich auburn, was now thin and gray. My eyes sunken. But there was something there. Something small. A flicker. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was survival. The miracle didn't come with angels or a lightning strike. It came in the form of a letter. An envelope addressed to me from a lawyer in New York. My cousin, whom I hadn't spoken to in 40 years, had passed. No children. No close relatives. Just me. I inherited her estate. Everything. A lakefront house. Stocks. Savings. Nearly $800,000. But I didn't tell anyone. That was the moment I decided, I won't die in this house. I won't let them finish me. I plotted in silence. Hid the letter deep in my sewing basket. I began writing everything down, every abuse, every insult, every bruise. I took pictures. Installed a hidden voice recorder in my walker. I smiled when they kicked me, nodded when they slapped my face. I endured it all for a little while longer. Because I wasn't just going to run. I was going to destroy them. If you're watching this right now and you're over 60, over 70, you are not invisible. If you're suffering, if someone has made you feel like your voice doesn't matter anymore, I'm here to tell you, they're wrong. You still have power. And sometimes, silence is not weakness. It's preparation. Please like this video, share it with anyone who needs to hear it, and leave a comment below. Where are you from? Have you been through something like this? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Subscribe to Whispers and Wills, because my story is just beginning. And trust me, the ending? They never saw it coming. The first time I smiled while David punched me, I tasted blood in my mouth. But it wasn't his blow that made me smile, it was the realization that he had no idea. None. They thought they were breaking me, but all they were doing was burying themselves. I became their shadow. Quiet, predictable, forgettable. A woman broken down to her bones. I kept cooking their meals, kept scrubbing the blood from the bathroom floor when my nose wouldn't stop bleeding, kept folding Elliot's shirts even though he spit on the floor in front of me like I was a dog. Because now I wasn't surviving. I was recording. The little microphone hidden in the hollowed base of my walker picked up everything. David's sneers, Elliot's threats, the wet slap of a palm on my cheek. Their voices were clear. Every word, "You're not worth the oxygen," David said one night after dousing me in cold water and locking me in the pantry. "I should have left your ass in that nursing home," Elliot muttered another night. "You're just a money drain." But the irony, the delicious irony, was that I had the money now. More than they ever dreamed of. The kind of money that gives a woman options. And power. I started getting up in the middle of the night when they were passed out drunk, Elliot on the couch, David in his recliner with a bottle of bourbon still clenched in his fist. I'd turn on my old laptop, dim the screen, and start transferring the audio files to a cloud folder. Every slap, every insult, every sound of my suffering, it was all saved. Labeled. Archived. And I did it while the chili powder still burned the cracks of my lips. Because yes, they kept using it. Almost like a ritual. Cleansing the demon out of you, David once said while grinding it into my gums with the back of a spoon. My gums bled so much that week I couldn't eat for 3 days. I lost 11 pounds in a month. My ribs looked like tree branches poking through paper-thin skin. But my eyes started to glow with something unfamiliar to me. Vengeance. Not the wild, angry kind. No. The cold, methodical kind that only comes when you've been planning while they think you're praying. Elliot had no job. Never tried. He pawned off my wedding ring one week when he claimed his car needed fixing. I found it weeks later in a pawn shop on King Street. The owner had it in a little glass case, priced at $18. Cheap metal, he said. I didn't buy it back. That ring was nothing but a shackle. Let it rot. David was worse. A master manipulator. He made calls to neighbors, telling them I was forgetting things, preparing his alibi. "She's got that dementia fog," he said at a barbecue. "Sometimes she thinks I hit her." Breaks my heart. And people believed him. Of course they did. What does a 72-year-old woman have left, besides wrinkles and ramblings? But what they didn't know was that I had a new friend. Her name was Stacy Bellamy, a former student of mine from the 80s. She found me on Facebook, saw my posts, polite, quiet ones about tea and gardening, but something in my eyes must have screamed louder than words. She sent me a private message. "You okay, Mrs. A? You don't look happy in those pictures." That message, it saved my life. Stacy's a lawyer now. Domestic abuse survivor. Has connections. Knows how to keep things discreet. I told her everything. At first she didn't believe me. Then I sent her the audio files. She called me the next night at 1 a.m. and said, "Marlene, don't worry. I've got you. But you have to keep pretending. Can you do that?" I nodded in the dark. That same night, Elliot came into my room drunk. I was in bed, pretending to sleep. He sat at the edge and whispered, "Do you ever wish you just died already?" I stayed still, silent. The mic picked it all up. And I thought, yes, Elliot. I did, but not anymore. I started mixing tiny doses of crushed sleeping pills into their coffee, just enough to knock them out for an extra hour. That gave me time to call Stacy using my old burner phone from years ago, one David thought I'd thrown away. She gave me names. A digital expert, a notary who came in the guise of a cleaning lady and had me sign papers that gave me full legal authority over my estate. Quiet power moves. Ones they didn't notice because they were too busy calling me senile. On one particular day, Elliot shoved me against the kitchen counter because I didn't buy the beer he wanted. My shoulder popped. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I laughed. That scared him more than anything I'd ever done. I watched his face pale. "What's so funny, hag?" he barked. I wiped the blood from my lip and said, "Just a memory, darling. Just a memory." What I didn't tell him was that the camera hidden in the spice rack caught the whole thing, in HD, with date and time stamps. By the end of that week, I had enough evidence to bury them in court. But I wasn't going to the police. Not yet. Not before I made them feel every ounce of what I felt. I wanted to be in control of their unraveling. I wanted them to see their world collapse and know why. You don't forgive demons. You exorcise them. And I had just begun sharpening my blade. The first thing I took back was the key to the shed. It was simple, really. David kept it hanging behind the kitchen cabinet, tucked into a crack in the wood where he thought I couldn't reach. But he underestimated these old bones. He didn't know that pain sharpens your instincts and your desperation. I waited until both of them were passed out. Elliot had taken too many sleeping pills from his depression stash, the one he blamed for his laziness and cruelty. David had his usual bourbon lullaby in the recliner. I slipped the key off its hook, careful not to let it clink. My fingers trembled, but not from fear. From fury. And anticipation. The shed was my old sanctuary, once filled with gardening tools and summer cushions. Now, it was a graveyard. Spider webs. Broken furniture. And, shoved in a corner, a trunk David had forbidden me to open. Useless crap, he called it. But I remembered what was in it. My father's tools. His old leather straps, his tackle box, his sharpening stones. A hammer, still engraved with his initials, G.A., George Ainsworth. A man of few words and quiet strength. He never raised a hand to my mother, not once. He had rough hands, but a tender heart. The kind of man David never could be. I opened that trunk and the smell hit me, old oil and leather and wood polish. It smelled like home, like a life that had been stolen from me. I reached in, picked up the hammer, and ran my thumb over the smooth handle. Then I took a screwdriver, a box cutter, a chisel. Not because I planned to use them. Not yet. Just holding them made me feel less helpless. I hid the tools behind the loose panel in my closet, wrapped in an old quilt. Then I closed the door, straightened my sweater, and went downstairs to make breakfast. Oatmeal, with a sprinkle of powdered laxative, just enough to keep them running to the bathroom while I worked in peace. Control. I was learning it again, piece by piece. The next thing I took back was my name. I was tired of being called bitch, hag, leech, stupid cow, deadweight. The venom David and Elliot spewed daily was no longer just emotional, it had become their language. So I made a decision. One morning, as David screamed at me for not ironing his pants properly, a task he hadn't asked for, by the way, I stood up straighter than I had in years and said, "My name is Marlene." He stopped mid-sentence, blinked, as if hearing me speak clearly had startled him. I hadn't raised my voice. I didn't flinch. I just stated a fact. My name, I repeated, is Marlene Ainsworth. And you'll use it. Or you'll starve. That earned me a slap. Hard. But I didn't cry. I smiled again. You see, when a victim smiles in the face of a predator, it shakes something primal in them. A realization that maybe, just maybe, the prey has teeth now. That night, I used the chisel. Not on them yet, but on the floorboard beneath my bed. I carved 3 words into the oak, slowly, methodically. They will pay. The following day, Stacy sent me an untraceable debit card tied to a ghost account. $1,000 loaded. Use it wisely, she said. I used it to order 2 hidden cameras from a shady online site that specialized in domestic surveillance. They looked like air fresheners. I placed one in the living room, the other in the hallway. Then I played the part of the dotty old woman again. Can't remember where I put the remote. I forgot to feed the cat. We didn't have a cat. They laughed at me. Thought I was slipping. Perfect. But inside, I was gathering storm. Elliot, for all his cruelty, was stupid. Addicted to ego. Every time he hurt me, he monologued. You think you're strong? You're a joke. You're nothing without us. You'd be in a home drooling on yourself if it weren't for me. Click. Recorded. David was worse. Methodical. Calculating. He liked psychological games more than fists. One evening, he made me sit on the floor for 3 hours holding a bowl of rice. Said if I spilled a grain, he'd pour boiling water on my thighs. I didn't spill a single one, but my legs went numb. And still, I didn't drop that bowl. Because every second was being caught on tape. Every scar now had a witness. There was one moment that nearly broke me. Elliot found one of my old journals in the attic. He brought it down and read it aloud to mock me. I love my baby boy. He giggles in his sleep. I hope he grows up kind. He read it in a sing-song voice. Laughed. You were always so pathetic. That night, I sobbed in the bathroom with my hands clenched so tight they went numb. My baby, my son, that little boy with milk-stained lips and giggles now turned into a monster who mocked his mother's dreams for him. But I didn't quit. Because women like me, women over 70, we've survived things others can't imagine. Wars, loss, loneliness. We've buried friends, outlived our parents. We've learned how to suffer quietly. But now, I was learning how to fight loudly. And soon, David and Elliot would hear me scream. Not from pain, from power. The day I first drew blood wasn't planned. But neither was my survival. It was mid-October, the kind of cold that seeps into your joints and makes every step feel like dragging chains. David was in one of his moods, storming through the kitchen because I'd forgotten to buy his brand of bourbon. He slammed the fridge, cursed about useless women, and tossed the bag of groceries across the floor. Eggs shattered. Milk soaked into the linoleum. I dropped to my knees to clean it, and he kicked the bowl of fruit across the room. Then came the slap. The one that split my lip clean down the middle. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But when I tasted the blood pooling on my tongue, something snapped. He turned his back, muttering, maybe next time I'll just lock you in the damn basement. That's when I reached for the broken ceramic from the shattered fruit bowl. I didn't think. My hand moved on its own. And I stabbed it into the back of his thigh. Not deep. Not enough to kill. But enough to make him drop. He fell hard. Screamed. You crazy old witch. Blood soaked through his jeans as he kicked away from me. And I stood there, breathing heavy, my fingers shaking, and all I could think was, his blood tastes like metal. And I don't regret it. He didn't go to the hospital. Didn't call the cops. Too ashamed. Too afraid someone might ask how he got bested by a 72-year-old woman with trembling hands and arthritis in both knees. That night, he limped around the house like a wounded dog. And for once, he didn't look at me with contempt. He looked at me with caution. A sliver of fear. And that fed me more than any meal I'd had in months. Elliot, of course, was worse in a different way. He stopped using fists and started using silence. He'd come home, say nothing, just eat whatever I made, then stand in the hallway and watch me. For hours. I'd pretend to fold laundry, dust picture frames, brush crumbs off the table. But I could feel him behind me, breathing, watching, like he was waiting for something. Maybe to see if I was planning anything. Maybe just to let me know that I wasn't invisible, I was his to haunt. But what he didn't know was that he wasn't the only one watching anymore. The footage from the hallway camera captured every minute of those silent stares. Every time he loomed in the shadows like a ghost. I saved them. Sent them to Stacy. She labeled them Stalking 1, Stalking 2, Predatory Behavior, Elliot. Evidence. Truth. Power. I kept my routine: cook, clean, obey. And in between, I made lists. Names of neighbors who once turned a blind eye. Dates and times of every injury. I took photos in the bathroom mirror of the bruises on my spine, the swollen knuckles, the blisters from standing too long without shoes. Sometimes I'd whisper to myself, "This is not the end. This is the rising." One night, I tested them. I replaced the chili powder in the jar with crushed dried beets. Same color, same texture, but harmless. David tried to do his usual ritual, grinding it into my mouth while Elliot watched with that bored smirk, but something was different. It didn't burn. I didn't cry. I just looked at him, red dust on my face, and smiled. He looked confused. His eyes twitched. "Why are you screaming?" I leaned in and whispered, "Because I'm already dead. You just don't know what you woke up." He shoved me back, hard. "What the hell does that mean?" I didn't answer. Let him wonder. That was the first night I slept soundly in months. Bruised, bleeding, but peaceful. Because I knew they were unraveling. David started second-guessing everything. He'd sniff his coffee before drinking it. Watch me while I stirred food. He even poured an entire pot of stew into the trash because he thought it smelled off. Elliot followed me into the bathroom one morning. I was brushing my teeth. He leaned against the doorframe and said, "If I find out you're doing anything behind our backs," I turned to him slowly, foaming toothpaste at the corners of my lips, and said, "Then I guess you'll learn what it feels like to be powerless." He didn't reply, just stared, then walked away. I knew then. They were scared. Not of what I was, but of what I could become. You see, when a woman is quiet, they think she's weak. But when she's calm, when she's still smiling through the bleeding, that's not weakness. That's war paint. And I was almost ready for battle. There was something behind the wall in the upstairs hallway. I heard it the night Elliot slammed the door so hard that one of the picture frames fell and cracked. I bent down to pick it up, a faded photo of me and my mother, long before David, before bruises became routine. As I looked up at the exposed patch of torn wallpaper, something glimmered beneath it. A seam. A hidden panel. I waited until the house was asleep before I peeled it back. My fingers shook not from fear, but from something I hadn't felt in a long time: curiosity. The kind that only survives when hope begins to crawl back from the grave. Behind the wallpaper was a small cubby, maybe 8 inches wide. And inside, wrapped in a silk handkerchief, was a bundle of papers, folded so tightly they'd yellowed and curled like old bones. Letters, written in my mother's handwriting. The first line on the top page hit me like a ghost's breath. "If you find this, Marlene, it means he's hurt you too." I dropped to my knees. The hallway spun. I hadn't heard her voice in over 40 years, and now it bled through ink and time like a scream stitched into paper. I read by moonlight. He wasn't always cruel, just like your father wasn't always kind. You learn with age that monsters wear many faces. Some bring flowers, some bring silence, and some bring you into this world only to treat you like a rag to wring out and throw aside. My mother had lived through her own secret torment. My father, George, the man I once idolized, hadn't been the savior I remembered. She wrote of his quiet rage, his punishments hidden behind locked doors, the belt that wasn't for the kids, and how she swallowed her pain because no one would believe her. I remembered how he doted on me, how he whispered bedtime stories, how he built me a tree swing. How could that same man break my mother's ribs for folding a towel wrong? She'd hidden these letters here when she realized she might never escape. A diary of desperation, soaked in ink and dread. But the final page, torn at the edges, stained with what looked like old tears, lit something on fire in my gut. We are not weak because we endure. We are dangerous because we remember. And someday, if you are reading this, I pray you find the strength to do what I couldn't: burn them from the inside out. Burn them. From the inside out. I clutched those pages to my chest and wept in silence. For her. For me. For every woman who sat in the quiet while the world looked away. That was the moment my revenge stopped being about survival. It became legacy. The next morning, I made pancakes. David liked his with peanut butter. Elliot liked his with syrup and a side of smug. I stood at the stove, humming. Wearing my apron with the daffodils, the one David said made me look like a senile cow. "Why are you smiling so much?" he asked, limping still from the leg wound. "Because I dreamed of my mother last night," I said, flipping a pancake. "She told me justice wears soft shoes." He squinted at me, confused. "What the hell does that mean?" I didn't answer, just handed him his plate with a smile and walked away. I had work to do. That day, I opened a new file on Stacy's encrypted drive. Final phase, Operation Chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemums were my mother's favorite flower. In Japanese folklore, they symbolize death and rebirth. Inside the file, I uploaded clips, David calling me a brain-dead whore as he hurled a plate past my head. Elliot cornering me in the laundry room, calling me a parasite, then shoving me hard enough to leave a bruise on my shoulder. The bleeding lip, the chili powder scenes. All of it, in full color. Unfiltered horror. Stacy messaged back, "I've seen victims. I've never seen anything this evil. We'll make sure the world sees it too, when the time's right." But I wasn't done yet. I went into David's closet and searched until I found his old safety deposit box key. He used to boast about it when he was drunk. A man needs a place to keep secrets his bitch of a wife can't find. Well, I found it. That night, I copied the key with clay and a wax mold while he was passed out. It would take weeks to forge a working duplicate, but I had time. I'd waited this long. Revenge, like tea, is best when it steeps. A week later, David had another outburst. Over socks. "They're not folded right," he screamed, throwing them in my face. He didn't notice I was recording. When he grabbed my wrist and bent it backward, I stared him straight in the eye and whispered, "Your time is running out." His hand loosened. "You threatening me?" he said. "No," I replied. "I'm promising you." That night, I returned to the hidden wall panel and placed my mother's final letter back into it, with one addition, a note of my own, written in trembling, powerful ink. "You were right, Mama. I remember everything, and I'm going to burn them. Not with fire, but with truth." "You're nothing but a ghost in this house," Elliot said. He stood in the doorway of my bedroom, arms crossed, eyes bloodshot. "You float around, cooking, cleaning, pretending you're still relevant. But really, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet." I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I looked him in the eye and said, "Good, because ghosts can go where the living can't. And they never forget who killed them." That was the day I decided to stop reacting. Stop begging. Stop pleading for scraps of humanity from people who had long since sold their souls. Instead, I would haunt them. Quietly, ruthlessly, until they were no longer sure what was real. It started with little things. The faucet in the bathroom would turn on at 2:17 a.m., the exact time Elliot once locked me in the cellar during winter because I forgot to buy his energy drink. David's favorite records, the ones he hadn't played since the 90s, would suddenly be stacked neatly beside the stereo with the sleeves half torn, like they'd been pulled out in rage. Elliot's phone wallpaper, once a smug selfie, suddenly displayed an old photo of the two of us when he was 5, smiling in the park, his arm wrapped around my neck. He swore he hadn't changed it. "I didn't touch this," he yelled one night, throwing the phone across the room. I smiled to myself. Because I had. Not magic. Not madness. Just subtle programming, borrowed from an old friend of Stacy's, a woman in cyber forensics. She showed me how to create phantom files and how to alter backgrounds remotely. How to leave breadcrumbs that made abusers question their own minds. It was beautiful. Watching Elliot unravel, bit by bit. Watching David start to double lock every door at night. watching both of them walk through the house like they were afraid the walls might breathe. I wanted them paranoid, shaken, confused, because fear was the language they had taught me for decades. Now I was fluent in it too. Then came the day I stopped pretending to love them at all. David had invited over his friend, Richard, a fellow retired cop, crusty and dull-witted. They sat in the living room, drinking bourbon, laughing at old stories about how they used to scare suspects into confessing. Hell, Richard chuckled, we once locked a guy in a car trunk for 4 hours. Claimed it was a test of patience. David laughed, eyes glinting. Sometimes pain's the only teacher that sticks. I stood in the kitchen doorway, just watching, listening, and then I said something I hadn't dared to say aloud in years. Is that what you told yourself the night you shoved chili powder in my mouth and held my jaw shut until blood poured from my eyes? The laughter stopped. Dead silence. David's face went pale. Richard blinked. What the hell's she talking about? David fumbled. She's senile. She forgets things. Makes up stories. I stepped forward slow. Calm. I remember everything. Every punch. Every boot heel to my ribs. Every time you made me eat glass for disrespecting your rules. Richard looked horrified. David, don't listen to her, he snapped. She's losing it. I placed a small USB on the table. A copy of just one video. The clearest one. David slapping me, forcing the red powder into my mouth while Elliot stood behind the camera laughing. Richard stared at it like it was a bomb. I remember, I whispered, and now, someone else will, too. I turned and left. The sound of the bourbon glass dropping behind me felt like thunder. That night, David didn't come to dinner. Elliot avoided eye contact. I sat at the table and ate alone, candle lit, with classical music playing. Chopin. A requiem. The haunting had begun. They started sleeping with their doors locked. David kept his old service revolver in the drawer beside his bed now. I knew this because I'd removed the bullets 2 days earlier. Elliot tried to install a camera in the hallway, but it didn't work. I'd already cut the power to that circuit. He thought the house was cursed. He thought I was cursed. One morning he screamed at me, threw a glass against the wall, and then he cried. Collapsed in the corner like a child. I don't know what's happening to me, he sobbed. I think I'm losing my mind. I knelt beside him, brushed his hair back gently, and said, I know. It's terrifying, isn't it? When your reality doesn't feel safe anymore. When every sound makes your heart jump. When someone stronger than you holds all the power, and you can't make it stop. He looked up at me. Red eyes. Raw throat. Is that what it felt like? He whispered. I didn't answer. I just walked away. Let him sit in that silence. Let him drown in it. 1 week later, I found a note under my bedroom door. 3 words. Please stop. Please. No name. No apology. Just please. That's when I knew. I had them. Not physically. Not in chains. But in the prison they'd built for me now turned inside out. And this was only the beginning. The stench started in the walls. It was subtle at first, a metallic tang near the vent in the hallway, a dampness in the pantry no one could explain. Elliot accused me of leaving food out. David tore apart the plumbing under the sink, screaming that I must have let something die in the drain. But I knew better. This house had begun to rot with their shame. The deeper they buried it, the more it festered. I watched David scrub the grout between the kitchen tiles for an hour one morning, muttering, I smell it. Don't you smell it? Elliot opened every cabinet, sniffing every corner like a bloodhound gone mad. It's you, he told me. You're poisoning us. In a way, I suppose I was. Not with arsenic. Not with bleach. But with truth. And truth seeps into everything once it's released. It was during this unraveling that I introduced the most beautiful piece of my revenge. The letters. I started placing pages from my mother's hidden diary in unexpected places, copies, not the originals. I slipped one into Elliot's backpack between a notebook and an old eviction notice he pretended I didn't know about. I used to believe love would save me. But then I realized Some children are born without souls. He found it at work. Called me 5 times in a row. I didn't answer. The next day, I taped another to David's shaving mirror. He said he hit me because I didn't listen. But the truth is, he hit me because he could. He smashed the mirror. Didn't speak for 2 days. Then came the newspaper clippings, every article I could find about elder abuse. Real stories. Women who died in silence. Women who were starved, bruised, raped, ignored. I folded them and tucked them inside their suit pockets. Under their pillows. In the glove compartment of the truck. I wanted them to read the truth of others and wonder, are we next? Will our names be printed in headlines soaked with horror? The house got colder. I didn't turn off the heat. I just left a single window cracked upstairs. Just enough. David's arthritis flared. He blamed the weather. Elliot started pacing the halls at night. I heard him whispering to himself. Sometimes he stood outside my door and just stood. I stopped pretending to sleep. I lay there, eyes wide, smiling into the dark. Let them know what it feels like to be prey. Then came the breaking point. David found the camera in the kitchen. One of the ones I'd hidden not for the case, but for them. So they could see what they looked like when they lost control. So they could watch the monster inside them. He was drunk. Red-eyed. Foaming. You spying on me, you rotten little hag? He shoved the table aside, grabbed me by the shoulders, and slammed me against the fridge. Tell me how long you've been recording. Tell me, Marlene. Blood filled my mouth from where my tooth struck the inside of my lip. I looked at him, calm, even as his spit hit my face. I've been watching you for years, I whispered. And the world's about to see what I've seen. He froze. For the first time in our entire marriage, he hesitated. I used that second. I brought my knee up, hard, between his legs. He crumpled like paper. Elliot came running down the stairs, shouting. But he didn't come for me. He grabbed David off the floor. You hit her again? He barked. Are you insane? David wheezed. She's destroying us. She's not the one who put chili powder in someone's mouth like a psychopath. Elliot snarled. I blinked. My throat tightened. It was the first time Elliot had called him out. Really called him out. David looked up at him. You helped me. You filmed it. And, just like that, silence. Heavy, shameful silence. Elliot looked at me. Eyes full of something that almost resembled guilt. But guilt doesn't erase the past. He stormed out. Slammed the door behind him. I watched from the window as he walked halfway down the street, then collapsed onto the curb, head in his hands. That night, I opened my mother's last letter again. Held it close. Whispered aloud, I'm almost there, Mama. Then I did something I never thought I'd do again. I laughed. Not from joy. From release. Because the house was crumbling around them, and I wasn't buried in it this time. The next morning, I set the final trap. I called David into the living room. I handed him a small envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You have 1 week to confess. Publicly. Or I will. He read it, scoffed, and said, to who? No one would believe a dried-up old bag like you. I smiled. Then I pointed to the television. And hit play. The screen lit up. A highlight reel of their worst sins, chili powder, bruises, screaming, laughter as I cried. All of it. David's hands trembled. I'll lose everything, he croaked. I already did, I whispered. David cried that night. Not the tears of remorse, but the wild, gasping sobs of a man watching the noose close around his own throat. He begged me not to release the video. Said he'd do better. Said he didn't know what came over him all these years. Blamed the job, the stress, the pills, his childhood. It wasn't me, Marlene, he whispered, crouched at my feet like a dog who bit the hand that fed him. I was broken before we met. You always knew that. I stared down at him. I didn't speak. Because I had known. But I stayed. I cooked. I smiled. I cleaned his blood-soaked shirts when he beat strangers and told me they deserved it. I covered the bruises on my neck with turtlenecks and smiled through broken ribs at church potlucks. So no, I didn't need to hear his pain. I'd been bathing in it for 40 years. He clutched my wrist. Please don't destroy me. I leaned close. I'm not destroying you. I'm unmasking you. And then I walked away. Elliot fared no better. He tried to be clever, slipping into my room with a USB stick of his own, hoping to delete the files from my laptop. But I wasn't that naive anymore. The laptop he found had a fake desktop. A decoy. The real files were already backed up, twice. When I caught him crouched by my bed, he had the gall to look ashamed. Almost tearful. I didn't know he did all of that, he said. Yes, you did. He tried again. Okay, I knew. But I was a kid. I didn't have a choice. No, I said softly. You had many chances. You made yours. He stood up, fists clenched. What do you want from me? I stepped closer. My voice was quiet, even, surgical. I want you to feel what I felt, to live with it, to walk through life with eyes hollowed out by guilt so deep it makes you sweat in your sleep. I want every woman you meet to remind you of the one you broke. I want you to know that nothing you love will ever feel clean again. Not without remembering what you helped do to your own mother. Elliot said nothing, just turned and walked out, shoulders hunched like a dying man. And in that moment, I knew guilt had finally pierced him. But guilt is not the same as justice. 3 days later, the letter from the Department of Justice arrived. An anonymous tip, complete with video files and statements, had made its way to an investigator in the Elder Protection Division. They requested a formal interview with me and indicated intent to open a case against both David and Elliot under the elder abuse and neglect statutes. I read the letter over and over, my hands shaking. Not from fear, from validation. I hadn't imagined it. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't just too sensitive or forgetful like they'd insisted for years. I was a survivor. And now, finally, someone saw me. David and Elliot panicked. Elliot stormed into the kitchen. They'll take the house. My job. My insurance. I'll be ruined. I sipped my tea. You were already ruined. This is just the paperwork. David tried threats. You want to go public with this? Fine. But I'll tell them you hit me, that you're delusional, that you faked the videos, that you're on medications. They'll believe me. I'm a retired cop. I smiled. Do it. Let's see how the world reacts to a badge soaked in blood. He paled. He knew. Times had changed. Whispers traveled faster now. Victims had voices. And proof. One night, I heard something strange. David, in his study, praying, muttering, shaking. He begged God for mercy. Said he'd sinned. That he'd lost control. That he didn't want to be this man. I stood in the doorway. Said nothing. He didn't see me. I watched him collapse onto the floor, sobbing like a child. The same man who once poured bleach in my bathwater for not ironing his shirts fast enough. He was nothing now. Just a withered thing begging for salvation from the very God he used to justify his hate. And then Elliot did the unthinkable. He asked if I'd go to therapy with him. Family counseling, he said. They say it helps. You can talk, I'll listen. We can try. We can rebuild. I looked at him, and for a moment, a flash, I saw the boy he used to be. The one who used to bring me wildflowers from the park. The one who would sing with me in the car before the darkness swallowed him whole. But I also remembered that boy standing behind the phone, recording me scream in agony. And I said, no. He flinched. Why not? I leaned forward. Because you can't build a house from rotted wood. And I was done building. That week, I received a call from the shelter I'd volunteered with years ago. They'd heard about my story. They asked if I'd be willing to come in. Speak to a group of older women, survivors, mothers, forgotten souls like me. I said yes, not because I wanted to tell my story again, but because I needed them to know silence isn't noble. It's a cage, and I was finally out of mine. The morning the state investigator arrived, The roses were in bloom, blood red, drooping under the weight of dew. I stood in the yard, trimming dead stems with the same shears David once threatened me with. I remembered his voice as clear as yesterday. If you ever talk about what happens in this house, these will clip more than roses. He said that the day after forcing chili powder down my throat for forgetting to pack his lunch. I bled from my gums for 3 days. I couldn't speak, couldn't eat. He called it discipline. Elliot filmed it and said I needed the lesson. Now those shears were mine. And they were dull, but I sharpened them every Sunday. The investigator was younger than I expected. Mid-30s. Female. Her name was Diana Pierce. She shook my hand gently, looked me in the eyes, and asked the question no one ever had. Marlene, do you feel safe in your home? I didn't cry. I didn't shiver. I didn't flinch. I said, not for the last 35 years. But I don't feel scared anymore either. We spoke in the living room. The very room where I'd been dragged by my hair, kicked in the ribs, fed hot sauce and lies. Diana noticed the small dents in the wall near the fireplace. She asked if I had evidence of what caused them. I said yes. I showed her everything. The video files. The letters. The bruises documented in journal entries. But what shook her most were the audio tapes. I'd recorded years of quiet terror. Fights behind locked doors. Screams. The rustling of fists against skin. David's voice, Elliot's laugh, and my sobbing. I played one recording where Elliot whispered, "Just hit her again. She's too old to remember it tomorrow." Diana covered her mouth. For the first time in my life, someone was horrified for me, not at me. They tried to stop her. Oh, they tried. David threw a fit, slammed his fist on the table, and screamed about his house, his rules. Diana looked him in the eye and said flatly, "You've just given me probable cause to request a temporary protective order." Elliot begged. "I'm trying to change," he said, eyes welling up. "I'm going to therapy. I haven't touched her in months." I raised my hand. And I said, "Silence is not change. Distance is not regret. And pretending you weren't the knife doesn't erase the wound." The order came through in 72 hours. Diana moved fast. David and Elliot were removed from the house. Not arrested, not yet. The criminal proceedings would take time. But they weren't allowed near me. Not within 300 feet. The moment they left, I changed the locks. Not for safety. For closure. I burned their bed sheets in the backyard that night. One by one. Watched the fabric twist and curl into ash. I buried the scraps beneath the garden. Right beneath the rose bush. Where David once stood, saying, "You're too old to fight back." A week passed. Then 2. Then I received a letter. From Elliot. It wasn't long. Just 3 lines. "Mom, I don't know who I became. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm asking anyway. Please meet me. Just once. If not for me, then for whatever version of your son still lives in your memory." I read it 10 times. I folded it. I put it in the fire. But something festered inside me. I started having dreams not of the past, but of futures that never happened. Dreams of Elliot at age 10, sitting with me on the porch, sipping lemonade and asking about heaven. Dreams of David reading to me at night before the violence took hold. Were they ever kind? Or had my mind painted those memories over like wallpaper on a crumbling wall? One night, I opened an old drawer and found a photo. I was young, 19, sitting beside David in front of our first car. My eyes were full of light. My shoulders weren't hunched yet. My hands weren't trembling. Next to it was a photo of baby Elliot curled against my chest. I held that image for a long time. Then I slid it back in the drawer and locked it. Because nostalgia is a liar. And I refused to mourn men who never mourned me. Diana called again. The case was moving forward. Formal charges were being considered. And then she said something that stopped me cold. "They're offering both of them plea deals if they attend a restorative justice hearing with you." Restorative justice. The idea that abusers could face their victims and understand the harm. that it could heal both sides. But I didn't want healing. I wanted truth. I wanted them to sit in front of me and see me strong, defiant, alive. I said yes, but I had a plan. The room was sterile. Pale gray walls, plastic chairs that squeaked when you shifted. Nothing warm, nothing comforting. It was perfect. The kind of room where confessions crawl out like roaches. Diana stood beside me, calm but firm. A security officer waited just outside the door. Not because I was afraid, but because sometimes monsters don't know they're caged until the walls push in. David entered first. He looked older. The cockiness was gone, replaced with a kind of dry twitch in his jaw. Like he was chewing on nerves and couldn't swallow them. He wore a suit. Of course he did. A mask of respectability, even now. Then Elliot walked in. Jeans, hoodie, unshaven. Pale. He wouldn't look at me. Good. Let the weight of my stare slice deeper than the belt ever did. They sat across from me. And for the first time in my entire life, they had to listen. Diana started, outlining the session. No interruptions. No excuses. Just stories. Mine first. So I told it. Not in anger. Not in screams. But in the kind of quiet voice you use when you're naming the dead. I told them about the time David forced me to crawl through broken glass to apologize for calling his drinking a problem. How he poured rubbing alcohol on my knees afterward and laughed. I told them about the night Elliot stood outside the bathroom door, listening while I sobbed after being force-fed chili paste and locked in the tub. How he mimicked my cries the next day to make his friends laugh. I didn't cry. They did. Good. But their tears weren't for me. They were for themselves. For being caught. For being exposed. They still hadn't learned. So I kept going. I described how my teeth came loose after David slammed my face into the refrigerator for putting salt in the wrong dish. I told them how I stopped looking in mirrors for years. How I couldn't remember the last time someone touched me without me flinching. How even now I sometimes sat in my closet at night just to feel small enough to disappear. Elliot finally broke. Stop, he whispered. Please. I turned to him. Did you stop, Elliot? When I screamed. When I bled. When you watched. He couldn't answer. David sat frozen. His face was stone. But I saw it behind the cracks, behind the wrinkles. Shame. The kind that eats you from the inside like termites. Then it was their turn. Diana nodded. Gave them space. David went first. I was raised by a monster, he said. That's not an excuse, but it's where it started. I didn't know how to love without hurting. I stared at him. You knew how to charm strangers. How to smile for neighbors. How to kiss my cheek at parties. So don't tell me you didn't know how to love. He looked away. I'm sorry, he mumbled. Not enough. Not even close. Elliot tried next. I wanted to protect you. I just didn't know how. No, I snapped. You chose not to. You chose him. Again and again. I thought it would stop. I thought it was normal. It became normal because of you. Diana asked the final question. Marlene, what would you need to heal from this? I smiled. Not kindly. I reached into my purse and placed two things on the table. One, a notarized legal notice revoking both David and Elliot from any inheritance, property claim, or financial dependency. Two, a photo of me, standing with three women from the shelter, arms linked, smiling wide, scars visible. Survivors. A new family. I don't need healing, I said. I built myself a new life. One where your names are ghost stories, not blood ties. Then I looked at them both. You're free now. But so am I. And the price of my freedom is that you live knowing you'll never be part of my peace. David wept. Elliot crumbled. I stood and walked out. And I didn't look back. After the restorative hearing, silence hung in my house like fog, thick, quiet, not quite peace, not quite dread. But I liked it. Because it was my silence. Not the silence forced between screams. Not the silence of fear. This was solitude. Space. Breath. I walked through every room and spoke aloud. This is my home. Each time I said it, something shifted inside me, like muscles loosening after a decades-long cramp. Then came the letters. David sent the first one, written in sloppy cursive, like a man whose hands had started to shake from the weight of what he'd done. He talked about regret, about wanting to come clean, about how maybe if he could explain, I'd understand he wasn't all bad. He ended it with, "You were the only woman who ever stayed." That has to mean something. I burned the letter in my sink and whispered to the rising smoke, "I stayed because I was scared. Now I'm not. So you're nothing." Elliot's letter came 2 days later. Typed. Polite. Almost rehearsed. He said he was in therapy. Said he wanted to rebuild trust. He asked if I'd consider letting him visit the house for a few hours to reconnect. He said he was sober now. Said his girlfriend left him, and he finally understood what it felt like to be discarded. I read it 3 times. Then I sent him a single text, "I'm glad you finally understand what abandonment feels like. Multiply it by 25 years, then we'll talk." He didn't reply. Weeks passed. The elder abuse case moved slowly, but deliberately. David was barred from working with any veterans groups again. His pension was under review. His name was entered into a public database for domestic abusers. A quiet shame, but a heavy one. Elliot lost his job at a youth outreach nonprofit once the video surfaced. The irony? He'd built a career around mentoring vulnerable boys. I laughed when I saw the headline, "Son of Abuse Survivor Dismissed from Outreach Program After Allegations." My face wasn't in the article, but my voice was, and now the world knew what he did. I began volunteering again. Twice a week, I sat in a circle with other older women, most of them gray-haired, hunched from time and heartbreak, and I told them my story. At first, they were quiet. Some cried. Some couldn't meet my eyes. But by the 3rd week, they started sharing their own pain. My daughter locked me in the basement so her husband wouldn't see me. My grandson stole my pills and blamed me to the police. My husband of 50 years told the nursing home staff I was crazy so he could sleep with the nurse. We weren't alone. We were many. And we were waking up. One night, I was invited to speak at a community event, Voices Unbroken. I stood on stage, gripping the podium with hands that used to tremble every time someone raised their voice. And I told the crowd, my husband fed me chili powder until I bled from the eyes. My son filmed it. They thought age would weaken me, but aging gave me clarity. And now I want every woman listening to know, we don't owe them forgiveness. We owe ourselves freedom. The applause didn't fix me, but it lifted me. And in the back row, I saw her, a young woman holding her grandmother's hand. Both of them crying. Both of them seen. The next morning, I got another letter. This one wasn't from David or Elliot. It was from a woman named Lucinda, age 78. She said, "Your story is mine." But I never told it. I want to. I just don't know where to begin. So I wrote back, begin where they silenced you. Then keep going. And so I kept going too. One Sunday, I planted a new rose bush in the garden. But this time, not to bury pain. This one I named after myself. Not Marlene, but Victory. Because I wasn't just a mother, or a wife, or a victim. I was a lesson. One that David and Elliot would carry like splinters under their skin for the rest of their lives. They thought I'd vanish. Women like me, we don't usually get chapters past our pain. We fade. We get tucked away in quiet nursing homes, fed applesauce and told to forget. But I didn't forget. I documented. Every bruise. Every slap. Every apology made with a clenched fist behind the back. And now, with the right people watching, I used it all. Because the past is only powerless when you're ashamed of it. I wasn't anymore. Elliot called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. His voice was shaking. "Mom, I lost the apartment. I messed up, I guess. I'm at a shelter now. I don't know what to do. I need you. Please." He'd never once called me Mom when the cameras were off. Only her. The old thing. It. And now, when the world turned its back, he remembered I had a name. I didn't call him back. Instead, I called Diana. "Can I donate to the shelter he's in?" I asked, anonymously. She paused. "Why?" I smiled, slow and bitter. "So he knows someone kind is still watching over him." But not me. David was next. His pension was reduced. His reputation collapsed. Turns out a lot of veterans remembered the things he said behind closed doors about training me, about disciplining the crazy woman. No one wanted him now. Not even his brother, who once called me too soft. David wrote again. But this time, it was different. His handwriting was shaky. His sentences slurred across the lines. He confessed to everything. He said, "You can send this to whoever you want." I'm done hiding. So I did. I sent it to the district attorney. I sent it to every women's shelter in the county. I even posted a photo of it, his confession letter, with his name visible. Caption: he used to scream I was weak. Now the world knows what he did to me. I am not silent anymore. The post went viral. Thousands of comments. Women my age. Women younger. Even men. They didn't just believe me. They thanked me. I began hosting private gatherings at my home. We called it the Red Circle. Older women only. Survivors only. We sat in a circle, each one holding a red thread. We passed it from hand to hand as we spoke our stories. One woman said her son left her with broken ribs because she asked him to lower the TV. Another said her husband made her walk in the snow barefoot to teach her a lesson. One woman sat silent the whole night. But when it was her turn, she just whispered, "I thought I was the only one." We all held her. Not with pity. With power. One evening, I received a visitor. A teenage girl. 15, maybe. She said her grandmother used to know me. Said her name was Ruth. I remembered Ruth, soft-spoken, lived 4 houses down, died 10 years ago. She always said you were the bravest woman she ever knew, the girl told me. She said if I ever felt scared, I should come find you. I offered her tea. She stayed for hours. When she left, she hugged me. And for the first time since Elliot was a baby, I held a child and didn't feel fear. Only purpose. Elliot wrote again. This time, it was different. He didn't ask to come home. He asked if I'd testify on his behalf, say he was trying to make things right so he wouldn't lose custody of his own son. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my tea. I wrote one sentence back. When I begged you not to hurt me, you said pain was just part of the process. Now you know what the process feels like. I mailed it. No signature. Just a copy of one of my old bruises, printed and folded into the letter. Let that be his keepsake. I'm not cruel by nature, but I learned cruelty at the hands of masters. And now I wield it like a mirror, so they can watch themselves rot in it. It was never a home. The house on Elridge Lane, white shutters, blue porch, crooked mailbox that Elliot used to hit with his skateboard. It looked like a postcard from the outside. But inside, it was a coffin. The bedroom where I was dragged by my hair. The kitchen where I was forced to chew raw chilies until my gums blistered and my ears rang. The hallway where I used to whisper apologies I never owed, just to survive the night. Now, it was mine. Every wall, every pipe, every light bulb. And I didn't just want to live in it, I wanted to rewrite it. So I did something radical. I sold it. Not for money. For transformation. I contacted a women's rights organization. I told them everything. Sent them documents, photos, letters. The story went National Widow turns House of Abuse into haven for survivors. We gutted the place. Sanded the floors where I'd crawled on my knees. Repainted the walls where my blood had splattered like rust. We tore out the bed frame that had once held my wrists in place. In its place, we built a meditation room. Every room became a sanctuary. Showers with benches for the elderly. Kitchen cupboards labeled for the blind. Lockable closets for medications, so no one could steal or poison or deprive again. We renamed it the Marlene Rose Center, a place where no woman would ever beg to be heard again. David found out through the news. He called Diana, begged to speak to me, said he wanted to see the place one last time. He said he was dying. Lung cancer. Stage 3. Said he wanted closure. I met him in the garden. I told him to sit on the bench that now stood where he once beat me until my hip fractured. He wheezed through his apology. I see what you've done here, he said. It's beautiful. Yes, I said. Because you're not in it. He coughed, shook, reached for my hand. I pulled away. You die with your guilt, David. I live with my power. And I left him there alone, surrounded by the fragrance of roses that bloomed from the same earth where I once bled. Elliot came by days later. Uninvited. He stood on the sidewalk, not daring to cross onto the property. His hair was long now. Face hollowed out. Sleepless. He didn't speak. Just looked at the sign on the gate, a safe place for women who were told they weren't worth saving. I stepped outside and faced him. He finally said, "Do you hate me?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "Hate gives you space in my heart. I evicted you from that a long time ago." His eyes watered. "Can I come in?" "Not to stay. Just to see." I paused. Then I handed him something. It wasn't a key. It was a mirror. Tiny. Handheld. The same one I used to stare into when I practiced smiling through bruises. "Take a long look," I said. "Because that face is the last person who ever gets to see what's inside these walls." And I walked away. The Marlene Rose Center became something more than I dreamed. Volunteers came from states away. Former victims became mentors. One woman who'd been locked in a trailer by her husband for 5 years now ran self-defense classes for seniors. Another who'd been trafficked by her son? She was writing a book. We lit candles on the anniversary of each woman's escape. And every year, we planted one tree in the backyard for every bruise we could remember. The yard became a forest. A living memorial to pain turned into protection. I no longer sleep with the lights on. I no longer flinch when someone closes a cabinet too hard. And I no longer call myself his wife. I am Marlene Rose. And the house they tried to bury me in? I turned it into a lighthouse. For every woman still lost in the dark. Justice is loud. It claps like thunder when the abuser is exposed. It rings in your ears when people cheer you on, call you strong, call you brave. But what no one tells you about justice is what happens after. The silence. The kind that makes you feel like you're floating above your own skin, watching the world move on while you remain still, unsure of who you are when you're no longer surviving. For weeks after David's visit and Elliot's empty stare at the gate, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear. From emptiness. I sat in my new apartment, smaller, warmer, filled with plants and light, and stared at the quiet. There were no footsteps outside my door. No doors slamming. No screams. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator. And me. Alone. But not lonely. Just unfinished. One night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. No bruises. No split lips. Just my face lined, weathered, older than I remembered. I said my name out loud. Marlene Rose. I kept saying it until it didn't sound like a stranger. Marlene Rose. I watched my own eyes and realized something. For the first time in decades, I was seeing the whole of me. Not just the parts that survived. Not just the wounds. The woman. The one who loved gardening. Who used to dance in the kitchen when no one was home. Who once dreamed of visiting Iceland to see the northern lights. I had been reduced to pain for so long, I forgot I was built from joy once too. And I wanted her back. So I wrote down every dream I had left. Small and big. 1. Plant a lilac bush. 2. Visit the ocean. 3. Learn how to make gnocchi from scratch. 4. Hug a stranger who needed it. 5. Laugh so hard I cry. 6. Ride a carousel even if people stare. 7. Say, I forgive you, and mean it, not for them, but for me. It felt silly at first. But then something incredible happened. I did one. The carousel. A little fair set up outside the library. Children screamed with delight. Parents took photos. I hesitated. Then I climbed onto a white horse with gold trim, gripping the pole like it was a lifeline. And as the music played, and the horse rose and fell, I laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A full, wide, trembling laugh that cracked something open in me. A woman nearby smiled. "You look radiant," she said. I hadn't been called radiant since 1986. That same week, I got a call from Diana. She'd just gotten off the phone with Elliot. He was in a treatment center now, court-ordered, but showing signs of actual effort. He asked her, "Do you think Mom will ever talk to me again?" Diana asked me what I wanted to do. I told her the truth. "I don't know. I want to see if he becomes someone worth knowing again." David passed away 2 weeks later. No funeral. No obituary. The man who used to beat me into silence died alone in a hospice bed, the TV buzzing white noise over his wheezing breath. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel sadness either. Just release. Like a rope around my throat had finally snapped loose. I lit a candle that night not for him, but for every version of me that died under his hand. And I whispered, "You don't own me anymore." At the Marlene Rose Center, we added something new to the garden. A circle of stones, each one painted by a survivor. Mine said, "Still here." Because that's the quiet truth so many of us forget to celebrate. We are still here. Even when the bruises fade. Even when the abusers die. Even when no one claps or congratulates us for simply waking up and breathing. Still here. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock. 3 taps. Hesitant. Light. My first instinct was to freeze, body tensing, breath pausing, memories flooding. But this wasn't 1993. This was now. And I was no longer the woman who flinched. I opened the door. And there he was. Elliot. Thinner. Paler. Sober. He stood with his hands behind his back, like a child caught sneaking candy. But it wasn't guilt in his eyes. It was something worse. Something more dangerous. Hope. "Hi," he said, voice raw. I didn't answer. He held something out. A box. Small, wooden, handmade. "I built this in the program," he said. "They told us to make something for the person we hurt most." I took it without opening it. Not out of forgiveness. Out of curiosity. Inside was a bundle of letters. Dozens. Some pages were tear-stained. Others smeared with ink. All addressed to me. "Dear Mom, I remember the day I stole your ring to buy weed. I lied and said I found it in the laundry. You knew, but you said nothing. Why? Dear Mom, I used to laugh when Dad called you names. I thought it made me stronger. I think it made me smaller. Dear Mom, do you still hate the sound of my voice?" I didn't cry. Not yet. I asked him the only question that mattered. "Why now?" He lowered his eyes. "Because when I was in withdrawal, I started seeing you in my dreams, but not how you looked when I was cruel to you. I saw you as a little girl. Scared. Alone. And I realized. I became Dad." That word cut. He rarely used it. He used to call David the old man, like a stranger. But now, he said it with shame. Like someone realizing the demon they feared had been growing inside them. "Can I just sit with you?" he asked. "We don't have to talk. I want to be near you once without hurting you." I thought of the years. The bruises. The lies. The nights I locked myself in closets because I was safer there than in my own bed. And I thought of the carousel. Of the laughter that cracked something open in me. And I said, "You can come in. But you sit on the floor." He blinked. "What?" "You sit on the floor, Elliot. Because for 20 years, I was beneath you. You towered. You screamed. You took space. You made me feel like dust. If you want to share a room with me now, you sit low. You earn your place back." He nodded and sat cross-legged on the rug. We didn't talk. I made tea, drank mine in silence. He held his, trembling, untouched. He cried without making a sound. I didn't offer a tissue. Sometimes, pain needs to be felt in full. After an hour, he stood. "Will I see you again?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not until you forgive yourself." He left. And I kept the box. Not because I forgave him, but because I wanted to remember that even monsters bleed when they finally see their reflection. That night, I sat under the porch light and opened the last letter. This one wasn't a confession. It was a story. He described the first time he remembered seeing me laugh. He said I was cooking eggs and dancing barefoot, and he thought I looked like a queen with a spatula. He said, "I don't know when I started seeing you as weak, but I know now I was looking in a broken mirror." And for the first time since his birth, I believed maybe there was something salvageable in him. Not today, not tomorrow, but maybe. I tucked the letter into a drawer, right beside the mirror I once used to practice smiling through pain. It no longer held that job. Now it waited for someone real, someone healed. There's a dress I never told anyone about. It's not in any photo albums. No stories passed down about it. No one asked, and I never offered. But it saved my life. It was navy blue, cotton, torn beneath the hem, smelled faintly of bleach and lavender. I wore it the day David beat me so hard I lost control of my bowels on the living room rug. I remember thinking, "Don't cry, Marlene. Don't let him see you collapse." But the pain was too deep. He had shoved me down for speaking over the TV, just 3 words, that's all I said. And as I lay there, humiliated, broken, choking on my sobs, he said, "Clean yourself up. You're disgusting." And then he walked out and slammed the door behind him. I crawled, inch by inch, back into the bedroom. That navy dress bunched under my knees, soaked in blood and shame. I washed it in the bathtub, hung it behind the furnace so he wouldn't see it missing. I told myself, "You'll never wear it again. Burn it, Marlene." But I didn't. I kept it, because somehow, in that moment, that dress became armor. It survived. I survived. Last week, I found it again, stuffed in a sealed bag behind the furnace at the old house before we donated it to the women's center. It still smelled faintly of lavender and bleach. And rage. I brought it home, and I stared at it for a long time. My fingers traced every stain, every stretch of torn fabric. Then I folded it carefully, and I drove to a cliff near the old town cemetery. That's where I buried it. No coffin, no ceremony, just a hole in the dirt and my shaking hands. As I shoveled the soil back over it, I whispered, "You did your job. You got me through. But I don't need you anymore." And for the first time in decades, I walked away without looking over my shoulder. That same evening, I got a call. It wasn't Elliot. It was his ex-wife, Melissa. We hadn't spoken since their divorce, 10 years ago now. I expected her to spit venom about Elliot, but her voice cracked like old glass. "Marlene," she said, "I just needed to tell you. He talks about you. A lot. In the meetings. Says you're the only reason he's still trying." I sat down. Hard. He told the group that he once hurt the most beautiful person he knew, and now he has to become someone she could even stand to be near. I didn't speak. I couldn't. He said he's not asking for your forgiveness. He just wants you to know. He sees it now. Everything. Every scar. Every mistake. He sees it. Then she said something that gutted me. He said if he ever has a daughter, he wants to raise her like you should have been raised. I don't know what I felt, but it burned. Like grief. Like hope's rotten twin. I lit a fire in the backyard that night. Just twigs and dry leaves and paper. I fed the flames one of Elliot's letters. Just one. The one where he described laughing while David called me a useless old hag. I watched it curl and blacken in the fire. Not because I forgave him, but because I was ready to start letting go of what wasn't mine to carry. I sat outside until the stars came out. I thought of that navy dress buried in the earth, and I realized something. The most dangerous thing they ever taught me was that I was only strong when I endured pain. But that was the lie. True strength isn't surviving the hit. It's choosing not to pass it on. And I would never pass it on again. They were going to tear it down. The house, the one with the green siding and the white door David once slammed into my face so hard, my nose bent for life. The women's shelter had bought it to rebuild, to gut the rot, bleach the memories, and turn it into something holy. But before the bulldozer came, they offered me a walkthrough. I hesitated. My therapist said I didn't have to go back. That healing doesn't always mean returning to the fire. But I wanted to, not for closure. For witnessing. Because no one ever witnessed what happened there. Only me. And walls don't talk. When I walked through the front door, I stopped breathing. The smell was gone, but my body remembered. The draft near the windows where he once shoved me outside barefoot in January because I burned his steak. The creak on the third stair, the one I memorized to avoid when I snuck into the kitchen for painkillers after he broke my ribs. The living room. That carpet. Where Elliot spit near my feet when I begged him to stop pushing his sister into corners. And the hallway. Where David once forced me to kneel for 4 hours with raw chili powder packed into my mouth, whispering, "Silence looks good on you." My eyes bled that day. Literally. A popped vessel from the screaming. And when I collapsed, he dragged me into the bathroom and called me pathetic while I vomited blood into the sink. And the next day, I still made him breakfast. Because I was afraid if I didn't, I wouldn't wake up again. I stood in the hallway now and whispered something back to the shadows. "You can't hurt me anymore." Then I took out the nail polish bottle I brought, bright red. And I wrote across the hallway wall, "I was here. And I survived you. Let the demolition crew paint over that if they want." But I knew. And he would know wherever he was now. In the kitchen, I opened the bottom cabinet. That's where I used to hide my journal. The one I ripped into shreds when David found one entry and burned it in front of me. He called my pain fiction. Said I was too old to be that dramatic. Now, in that same cabinet, I left a new journal. Blank. Its first page said, "This house once held screams. Now it holds stories." Maybe the next woman who walked in would write hers. Maybe her son would read it and change before it was too late. As I stepped outside, I saw something unexpected. Elliot, leaning against his car. Hair longer. Beard gone. Eyes clearer. He hadn't told me he'd be here. But Diana did. I looked at her across the lot. She gave me a small nod and stepped back. Elliot approached slowly. I wanted to see the place. One last time. I didn't invite him in. But I didn't stop him either. We walked through separately. When he came back out, he sat on the porch step and buried his face in his hands. "I remember yelling at you. Right here. Over the phone bill. You hadn't even used the phone. I just needed someone to hurt." He didn't cry. He just crumbled. I sat beside him, close enough to feel the weight, but not close enough to offer comfort. He needed to feel this part alone. "I know you'll never forgive me," he whispered. I nodded. "Good. You're not owed that." Then I looked him in the eyes. "But you can earn something else." He swallowed. "Like what?" "Purpose." I handed him a piece of paper. It was the deed to the new shelter that would stand on this land. And I had listed him as a donor. Anonymous, of course. Every month, you'll put in. Not to erase what you did, but to make sure another woman doesn't suffer what I did. His eyes widened. "Why would you let me do this?" "Because rotting in guilt helps no one. But working through it might save someone." He didn't hug me. I wouldn't have let him. But when he left, he looked back once. And in that glance, I didn't see David. I saw the boy he once was. Before the poison. Before the rage. Before the legacy of cruelty infected him. And I wondered, just for a moment, what it might have been like if we had both been born in a different home. A different story. A different world. But we weren't. We were born into this one. So we had to burn it down and build something better. Even if it trembled in the wind. Even if it never fully stopped shaking. They gave me 10 minutes. just 10. The community center had organized a panel for survivors of domestic abuse. I hadn't signed up, but Diana had. In my name. Tell your story, Marlene, she said. Tell it loud, while you still have breath. So I did. Not for sympathy. For testimony. The room was full. Not just women. Men too. Some with bruises hidden beneath sleeves. Some with wounds in their silence. There was a trembling in the air, like everyone was waiting for someone else to speak first. I didn't wait. I stood at the mic. And I began with this. My name is Marlene. I am 74 years old. For 40 years, I was beaten, belittled, starved of affection, and punished for breathing too loudly. My husband put raw chili powder in my mouth when I talked back. My son watched and then learned to do the same. I have scars in places you cannot see, but I am no longer silent. The room went still. People stopped sipping water, stopped adjusting in their seats. And I kept going. You want to know what domestic abuse looks like at 70? It looks like hiding your bruises behind orthopedic socks. It looks like being shoved so hard your hip fractures and you lie about falling in the garden. It looks like cooking dinner for a man who spat in your face because you forgot to buy his favorite beer. My hands trembled. I gripped the podium harder. It looks like raising a boy who once kissed your forehead before school, only to grow into a man who breaks your dentures with his fist and blames the pressure of life. No one moved. Some stared in horror. Others wept. But I'm not here to be pitied. I'm here because I stayed alive long enough to fight back. I planned in silence. I escaped. And then, I made them pay. Someone gasped. Good. Let them gasp. I paused. And then I did what no one expected. I read their names. David Kessler. My husband. Deceased. Elliot Kessler. My son. Alive. In recovery. A few in the crowd murmured. Eyes darted toward Elliot, who sat in the back. He didn't flinch. He nodded once, like a soldier owning a war crime. They wanted me to die quiet. I chose to live loud. They tried to bury me. I became the soil. When I finished, the room was silent for one long moment, then applause. Not polite applause. Rising, crashing, raw. Afterward, 3 women approached me. All over 70. One had a walker. Another wore sunglasses inside, hiding a healing black eye. The third just said, "Thank you. You said what I never could." I didn't smile. There was no triumph in this. Only ache. But ache, I've learned, is a powerful teacher. That night, I found Elliot waiting outside my apartment building. He didn't ask to come up. He just handed me a box. Inside was a necklace. Gold-plated. Simple. Engraved with the word, remade. I stared at it. Not because of what it was, but because I recognized the chain. It used to be his father's. He had it melted down. Transformed. I nodded once. Didn't thank him. Didn't hug him. Just said, use that fire in your gut for others now. You already burned enough of me. He nodded, tears welling. And left. That night, I sat on my porch swing with Diana. I feel hollow, I whispered. She sipped her tea. That's what it feels like when the ghosts finally shut up. There's a room in my new home I never let anyone enter. Not Diana. Not the volunteers. Not even the caseworkers who check on me from time to time. It's painted soft gray, with white curtains that catch the morning light just right. I call it the quiet room. Inside, there's only a chair, a photograph, and a folded letter on the windowsill. The photograph is of me, from 1974, 30 years old, standing outside a church with my hair curled and a bruise just visible near my collarbone. David took that photo. He said I looked almost presentable. I kept it, not because of him, because of her, me, in that photo. A woman who didn't yet know she'd be beaten with a curtain rod in front of her infant son. A woman who hadn't yet crawled through snow with cracked ribs to reach a neighbor's porch. A woman who didn't yet know her greatest legacy would be surviving them both and rising from their wreckage. I look at her sometimes, and I whisper, "We made it." Barely. But we made it. The letter on the sill? That's for Elliot. Not to give him. To remind me. I wrote it after he begged, through tears, for one more chance. After he sat on my kitchen floor, sobbing like a child, saying he didn't know who he was without my forgiveness. The letter says, "You are not my healing. You are the wound I outgrew." And I meant it. That letter helps me remember what I almost forgot, that I didn't survive for him. I didn't endure so he could find comfort. I endured because I still had a voice. And a right to peace. Last week, I got a call from a shelter in Nevada. They'd heard about my story. They wanted to name a new wing after me. I said no. Not unless it was named after the women who never got to speak. So now there will be a hall called the Unnamed. Their stories burned before they were told. Their pain buried with their bodies. But not forgotten. Not anymore. Diana brought me a cake yesterday. 75 candles. I blew them out in a single breath. She laughed and asked what I wished for. I said nothing. And I meant it. Because for the first time in my entire goddamn life, I don't want more. I want this. The quiet. The stillness. The absence of fear. The room that holds only light and memory. There are still nights I wake up sweating. My hands clawing the sheets, certain I'll see David's shadow in the doorway or feel Elliot's fists at my back. But when the panic fades and I see the soft gray walls and the photograph beside me, I remember. That girl in the picture. She didn't die. She just waited. Waited until the rage cracked open into courage. And then she stepped forward and reclaimed her name. I still go to meetings sometimes. Still speak to women older than anyone thinks abuse happens to. I bring my walker, my cane, my gold necklace that says remade. I tell them, you're not broken. You're buried. And you've been waiting for your own hands to dig you out. And I always say one more thing before I leave the room. The people who tried to erase you will have to live forever with the memory that you refuse to disappear. Before I begin, I want to say something to everyone watching this. If you've stayed with me until now, if you felt the sting behind your eyes when I spoke about hands that once loved you turning into fists, if you've ever cried into a pillow because no one believed your pain, if you've ever wondered whether you were too old to leave or too late to matter, then this is for you. Subscribe, like, share this with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, where are you from? Have you ever survived something no one knew about? Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? You are not alone. I was 72 when I escaped. Now I am 75. And I've never been more alive. David died 2 years ago. Alone. In a hospice bed. The nurse told me he called out for me before the end. I never went. Let him beg the silence for forgiveness. Let the last voice he heard be the voice of regret, not mine. Elliot still writes me. Sometimes a letter. Sometimes a check to donate anonymously. Last week, he sent a photo. He was standing beside a woman in her 60s at a shelter in Arizona. She'd just escaped her abuser. Elliot helped drive her there himself. On the back of the photo, he wrote, "I can't undo what I did to you, but I can help stop what might happen to someone else." I didn't cry when I read it. I felt something colder. Satisfaction, not forgiveness. Because forgiveness is a gift. And he hasn't earned it. But justice? Justice is a seed I planted long ago, and now it's blooming in his conscience. I went to the ocean last month. First time in decades. I stood barefoot in the surf, cane in one hand, scarf wrapped tight around my frail old neck. And I screamed. Not words. Not grief. Just sound. Because for too long, I'd been made to live quiet. Too long, my voice was stolen, stuffed with pepper and lies and guilt. That scream? It wasn't for them. It was for me. If you're listening to this, and you're still with someone who bruises your ribs or your spirit, if you're being told you're crazy, or dramatic, or too sensitive, if your own child has turned into a monster in your own home, listen to me now. You are not weak. You are not late. You are not broken beyond repair. You are buried. and the world has tried to forget where it put you. So dig, claw, crawl if you have to. Because when you come out of that grave, you don't come out soft. You come out ready. I once thought revenge meant hurting them the way they hurt me. Now I know better. Revenge is living so boldly that they cannot deny the mark you made on this earth. It's becoming the storm they thought they'd drowned. It's walking past their gravestones and smiling, not in victory, but in freedom. So, if you're still in that house, if you're still whispering to yourself in the dark, if your own family is your prison, know this: one day, your story will be told. Not as a tragedy, but as a resurrection. And the world will finally see you were never just an old woman. You were a reckoning with gray hair and steel in her bones. Thank you for listening to my story. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? What pain have you endured in silence? You're not invisible anymore. Not here. Not with me. Because I see you. I am you. And we survived. Now let the world hear us.